So let me pull up your tweet right now for everybody to see. Um, so Robbie tweeted this out. What was this now? You tweeted this out, dang, not that long ago, just last week. On April 12th, you said, breaking new financial disclosures show Speaker Pelosi and her husband, Paul, purchased up to $10 million worth of Microsoft in March. The couple also purchased up to $3 million more of global investment firm Alliance Bernstein and up to $1 million in Roblox. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and why this is so significant?
Well, the Roblox thing is just funny. All right. So let's just get that out of the
Yeah.
way. All right. But okay. So I guess the first question would be for somebody that's like totally new to this story, well, would be why does this matter?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Why is this news? So why it's news is because whether or not you believe uh, your elected officials should be profiting off the stock market or not, I happen to be in the camp of they should not. But
Mm-hmm.
regardless of how you feel about that, it is publicly relevant information to see where your publicly elected officials are moving their money, especially when they're investing in the companies that they are charged with regulating. I think that's the big thing here. It's so there's that, and it's also the fact that for let's just face it, for 99% of us, uh, a lot of these stock transactions that we see congressmen and women like Pelosi make would get us a very strong like we would be on the radar, right? We might
Mm-hmm.
get a little knock on the door from the FBI for that. So, you know, but for Congress, it's it's a completely different ballgame. So what happened, right? The Alliance Bernstein thing, that's, I mean, it's still a lot of money being invested, but that's kind of an under the radar thing. The Microsoft is where the juice is, I guess, with this story. And so up to 10 million was purchased by Nancy Pelosi. And so there's a couple of things. The first thing is what I reported on, which was, well, I mean, I wasn't the person that broke the fact that this contract existed, but in my report, I kind of put two and two together. Is that the date of her purchasing Microsoft kind of was just a couple of weeks before the Pentagon announced a $22 billion contract with
Yeah.
Microsoft to supply 120,000 augmented reality headsets to the U.S. military. And then it was brought to my attention by Sludge, the online publication Sludge, that you know just a couple weeks before she had actually made the purchase, uh, she apparently sits on the committee that stripped out a clause that would have what was trying to be or an amendment struck down an amendment that was trying to be added into HR1 that would have required what is it? Correct me if I'm wrong, Franco, because I'm sure you have the article in front of you. It's
Mm-hmm.
like but it wasn't it that they either had to liquidate or move all of their stock or stock assets either into a blind trust or something like that, and
Into a
it was
blind
for
trust.
both them and their spouses,
Yeah, and dependent, like children who are dependent of them.
children.
Yeah,
Okay, so it was trusts, right?
yeah.
It didn't say okay. So basically, it was you cannot invest in individual stocks anymore. You got to put it in a blind trust, which is a half measure, admittedly, but it's better than what we have now. Um, and we can kind of go through the semantics because but so Pelosi just being obviously she's going to be on a lot of relevant committees, but excuse me, but it's just okay. So the timeline is an amendment. I feel like it was trying to be added by Spamberger, right? Representative
Spamberger,
Spamberger
yeah, and
was
what's his name? Rich Coy of Texas.
right.
They're,
Um, so they try to add this amendment. Pelosi's committee strikes it down because that would have required her husband to put all of their assets in a blind trust and
mm-hmm.
not be able to make moves in the market. And then they make a big move in the market right after the amendment. That, I mean, like, not that the amendment would have taken effect in time to stop this move, but it's still like, nope, we're going to keep doing this. And then we disclose this big investment, and then a couple of weeks later, the Pentagon discloses a new contract for Microsoft. The Microsoft stock price jumps on the news. It's up like 10% since the last time or since they bought into it. So they've already made a nice little chunk of change with the investment. It's just a whole lot of bad looks. Like the really, can we call it insider trading? For you or I, probably. Because you have to remember, man, Nancy Pelosi, not just, normal representatives or senators, but, Nancy Pelosi is in buildings we'll never be able to go inside.
Exactly.
In rooms we'll never go into, talking to people we'll never meet about things we'll never know about. You can't get much more insider than that. So, but yeah, so for you or I, definitely a crime. For them, it's not. And for Pelosi in particular, she's not the only one, but she's one of the most prominent ones. For Pelosi in particular, this is just another, link in a long chain of her having excellently timed massive stock purchases and taking advantage of the market.
It just gets lucky each and every time, right?
It's amazing because she bought the Tesla stock right before Biden announced his plan to invest in the electric vehicle industry, and it was a big thing like that. She made a killer investment late last year whenever she invested in CrowdStrike towards the end of last year, which we broke here at MCSC Network, and she she's made a ton of money off of that one. And her latest financial disclosures, she'll file another one this year. They usually ask for like 45-day extensions, so we might see them sometime. I want to say June is when we'll probably get the 2020 covering last year. But as for 2019, which is the most latest version of her financial disclosures, we can set aside the $60 million, vineyard or whatever, and all the properties she owns, at least three business ventures that they have ownership stakes in that took PPP money, by the way. Just looking at stock investments, there's like 25 million in, I think it's Apple or crap.
Yeah, I'll pull up the exact numbers.
It was like 25 million in Apple or Amazon. It's one of the two, because I've got a tweet with it on there.
Yeah.
That I used for reference. But it's like, up to 5 million in Salesforce, which is a whole other can of worms for Pelosi, because it's a San Francisco based company that is using her former comrade in arms, Senator Jim Moran, I believe, to lobby the government for contracts. Like, we start talking about all this, and I know a lot of people might be listening like, this is just a bunch of shit being thrown at me like all at once. And what does it mean? It means that corruption is like a spider web, and sometimes it's very neat and symmetrical, and you can just look at it and easily see where each strand goes and the shapes that it makes when they connect. Other spider webs, it looks like a stick's been thrown through them or something, or the spider was drunk, right? And the strands don't always meet up where you think they do, and it's just a mess. But it still is a web of corruption all the same. So it takes a little bit of unwinding, I guess, whenever you really have to look at it. Nancy Pelosi, in particular, is one of the most obviously opportunistic politicians in the entire country. She's got like one of the lowest approval ratings of any politician in the country, for good reason, because she continues to do things like this. I don't know what you think, Franco, but quite honestly, it's kind of absurd that like a presidential appointment, like a cabinet member, a presidential nominee, that anybody that has to be confirmed by the Senate has to sign ethics agreements, many times involving them divesting from a lot of their stock holdings. But
yeah, like Lloyd Austin, but then he was excused or something, and then he was able to keep some Raytheon. Like how long? What was it? Like he was like he held stocks in Raytheon like not too long ago, but then they allowed him anyway.
So what's happening with that is like a slow process of like, he doesn't have to sell it all at once. So it's like a trickle thing. You know what I mean? But he still has to divest, and like John Kerry and his wife had to divest from like 400 different companies. These are all Senate confirmed. Most of them are Senate confirmed appointments. But but the Senate that actually has to confirm them doesn't have to divest the damn thing, uh, which makes zero sense whatsoever. And you can look at numerous studies that have been published that are out there for everyone to see on the good old internet that will tell you how amazingly timed representatives of our government their stock trades are, and they beat the market like almost every time. And I mean, people ask how Nancy Pelosi how she has a net worth of $14 million. This is how.
Yeah, and we don't have proof, but I mean, like it's way too coincidental. And that's I also I'm glad you brought up CrowdStrike because there's a significance with that, right? Like, what didn't it have some connection with RussiaGate also? Like for the people who don't know, or for people who need to be reminded, why is CrowdStrike so significant?
Well, I mean, it's just if I'm not mistaken, CrowdStrike was supposedly the ones that were basically told everybody that we were compromised by the Russians.
Yeah,
they were the and which they never actually could prove, and they never actually did prove. But CrowdStrike is a very popular company within Democratic circles, and look, it's just another one of the. And by the way, like I said, Nancy Pelosi has made a lot of money off of that CrowdStrike investment. That was a good move on her part, and we can even go back to like, that's the one that's like, okay, it just looks weird, with CrowdStrike's involvement with all of the DNC supposed like the hacking or whatever the hell they said happened, or and it's just like, okay, and of course Nancy Pelosi's got a huge investment in them, so of course you would, right? But we can even look back further to something that I felt was even worse. So back at the beginning of the pandemic, we're talking like March 2020, when the lockdowns were really starting to come into effect. Like Nancy Pelosi and her husband really thought they were going to be slick and make a quick buck off of the telecommunications, the teleconference industry, and they put a big investment in on Slack, which was okay, but really in the long run they missed, because they should have just bet on Zoom. Actually, as it comes out. But I know I'm making light of a very serious subject, but the fact is that that's an obvious attempt of trying to take advantage of a pandemic economy, and you're like what, third in line for the presidency? I mean, what? It shouldn't be allowed, because whether or not you can prove anything nefarious has happened, there's two major problems. One is that it looks terrible, and two is that the opportunity for nefarious deeds shouldn't even exist. Like, there shouldn't even be an option for Nancy Pelosi to buy these stocks and look as if there could be impropriety, because she shouldn't be allowed to have them. And since she's not allowed to have them, there cannot be any questions of impropriety or conflicts of interest, at least when it comes to that particular issue. But we allow it, and so now we have all these issues, and it's just another reason why you can't trust your government, because Nancy Pelosi. Honestly, anybody can objectively look at her stock trade history and say, okay, she's in it to make money. She's in this to make money. There's no way, like, obviously there's no proof. I don't want to get hit by Nancy Pelosi's lawyer, like, later on tonight. But quite honestly, it looks terrible. I mean, she makes it obvious. Other representatives, not so much. But it shouldn't. But the fact that she just flaunts it like the way she does is kind of sick, but nobody ever says anything about it.
She's arrogant about it.
Yes.
And yeah, let's talk a little bit more also, like the timing, like which we were getting into, because this comes after she blocked votes on the amendment, like the Spanberger, the co-sponsored amendment by Spanberger and with Chip Roy. So let me pull up that Sludge article real quick, because I want to highlight some stuff from there. So here's an article by Sludge. It says Pelosi controlled committee blocks votes on congressional stock holdings. So for people who don't know, there was an amendment that was co-sponsored and pushed for by the most by House Representatives Abigail Spanberger, who's a Democrat from Virginia, and Chip Roy, who's a Republican from Texas. And they wanted this amendment to be a part of H.R. 1. The amendment was going to require spouses and other family members, like dependent children of representatives and senators, to put their stocks and other covered investments into blind trusts until after they step out of office. I mean, that sounds pretty fair to me. And we see that
First step.
yeah, as a first step, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see that Pelosi and the committee that she controls, they blocked this. So I just want to read this one part here. It says Nancy Pelosi is one of the wealthiest members of Congress, and her husband Paul Pelosi is one of the most active stock traders among congressional spouses.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Pelosi would have to give up his stock trading if the Spanberger Amendment were law. Nancy and Paul Pelosi have dramatically increased their wealth, while Nancy has been a top figure in the House. In 2008, Nancy Pelosi's net worth was approximately $31.8 million, according to the Center for Responsive Politics analysis of her financial disclosures. By 2018, 10 years later, the center estimates have her net worth wealth to have ballooned to $114 million. Most recently, Pelosi disclosed that her husband bought up to $1 million worth of shares, each in Tesla and Walt Disney, as well as up to $500,000 in Apple stock. The periodic transaction report prior to that showed Pelosi exercising call options to buy up to $5 million worth of Amazon stock and 5,000 shares of Facebook stock valued at up to $1 million. Paul Pelosi also made some good trades late last February as the pandemic was coming into focus. On February 20th, 2020, he purchased 10,000 shares of Slack Technologies, which we were just talking about, which makes messaging software that exploded in usage as companies shifted to remote work. He also picked up millions of dollars worth of shares over the next week in Alphabet and Microsoft, both companies that make software that would surge in remote work usage over the following months. Trading in tech stocks has been practically profitable for the Pelosi's. The Center for Responsive Politics finds that the Pelosi's investment in the communications/electronics sector increased from $5.6 million in 2008 to $25 million in 2018, by far the largest increase of the couple's investment in any sector. Yeah, Robbie, what do you think about that, man?
I think that makes as good a case as any as to what exactly I'm talking about when I say that Nancy Pelosi is showing you how she's making all this money. They said it right there from what was it, 2008, 38 million. 2018, in 10 years, she added, what was it? Like 70 some odd million, almost 80 million to her net worth in 10 years. She did it over the stock market. Okay. Mostly. She also, like I said, they have business ventures. Like her husband is a owner of a very upscale restaurant. They have a very, very, very highly valued vineyard in San Francisco, or so like they they definitely have money. But I mean, yeah, well, and here's the thing too, is that you're going to see whenever you look through the wealthiest members of Congress and you look through their financial disclosures, I've noticed, and I mean, and you're going to notice this no matter where you look when you're looking at big money in the market. You're going to see the same names over and over again as far as companies, right? You're going to see a whole lot of Alphabet / Google, right? You're going to see a lot of Microsoft, Apple, Amazon. These are just something that, if you're a politician, you can buy these and just be like, well, they're obvious buys, they're smart buys, and nobody's really going to look one way or the other, most times, right? Other than the fact that these are the companies that need to be oversaw the most. I mean, there's antitrust shit flying all around with Google and Amazon. There's of course Apple is the technology sector, and who knows who's buying what, like from the CIA
Mm-hmm.
We just don't know because we can't trust any of these people, right? And now we can't trust the people that are supposed to be overseeing them because they have all these investments, right? And when I say like CIA, Apple, and Amazon, and what I mean is that these giant tech companies, as we know, um, work with national intelligence services behind the scenes all the time. Um, so, you know, we don't know who's doing what, and we can't trust anybody to really tell us because we can't trust the person that's got millions of dollars invested in Google to tell me the truth about what Google's doing, or tell me that they're going to make sure Google doesn't run amok and do stuff they're not supposed to be doing. Uh, it's just a bad spot to be in, quite honestly. So the Nancy Pelosi dude, like I don't know what to tell you. She's the poster woman
Mm-hmm.
for why representatives in Congress should not be allowed to own stock. It's simple to me. It's very simple to me, right? Um, it's also because I've never been wealthy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's simple to me because it's like as a U.S. representative or senator, president, whatever, you are a public servant. Um, if you want to be a public servant, then you should have to live off of a government salary, and that's it.
Exactly.
I mean, look, and it's like, okay, well, that's not fair, blah blah blah. Well, it is fair because it really boils down to how bad do you want to be a public servant?
Yeah,
Do
they
you want to be?
volunteered for that. Yeah,
Do you
otherwise,
want to
if they're
be?
going to be making money off of these stocks, then they're making money off of private interests, right?
Yeah,
So are they're gonna it's going to conflict with them serving the public because then they're going to be serving the private sector. You can't be serving both at the same
right.
time. And yeah, Shadow Ban Refugee in the live chat, he brought up something interesting. He said he doesn't think that the problem is transparency. He says the problem is like lack of consequence and legal action. There's not a lot of people that are pushing for this, but I think that it's transparency, and I think that the problem is transparency in the sense that other members of Congress are not calling this out, and that's because they're also doing the same thing that Nancy Pelosi is doing, and I don't think that there's enough people in independent media calling this out. But yeah, tell me if you agree with that in any way.
Well, I would just say quickly that I think the transparency um, really isn't, to me, it's not the problem because they have to file these filings that show you what they've done. But they have to do it within 30 days, so the money's already been made by the time they're disclosing it. So, but but I do think the second part is absolutely true. There's no consequence for they can put it on this paper and wave it in your face all day long. Look what I did, right? Look at all this money I just put in Microsoft right before we gave them a big old fat juicy contract. Look at what I did, and nothing's gonna happen, uh, and that's a problem. And the what's worse is that they don't even see it as a problem.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even see it as something wrong. It's totally normal behavior for them, and that's the part that drives me up a wall. It's like they don't even want to change because they don't see anything wrong with what they're doing. Uh, and like I said, like that amendment to HR 1 would have been great, but there was no way in hell it was ever going to make it. It was never going to make it because if it even if it did somehow make it through the Democratic Party and the caucuses, it was never going to get through the GOP. And it would have been DOA, but that's what we need. That's the
Mm-hmm.
reform we need. Blind trust is a good first step, um, because here's the thing. I mean, blind trust, you can still control them. You can just make a phone call to your money manager and say, "Hey, I don't want to be in this. I want to be in that." There's been people kicking around the ideas of making them invest in index funds, like Janet Yellen did when she divested, when she was confirmed as the treasurer. So, and what she did was basically she sold off millions of dollars in her stock, and then she reinvested them into index funds, which for those who don't know, is not like one company. I'm investing in basically an entire sector. So it's like 20 tech companies. So it's not just Amazon, it's Amazon, Apple, Google, Microsoft, all that. It's not just one utility, it's all of them or a lot of them. So advocates for that method would sit here and say that at least you're not playing favorites, so to speak, with a particular company in your portfolio. You're basically investing in an entire sector and hoping that a rising tide lifts all boats or whatever. But I still feel like, okay, so now you're not just beholden to one company, you're beholden to all of them. So but then again, and index funds are a common, or the most common vehicle for 401ks and stuff like that. So, I mean, they have their uses. I just feel like if divesting your stock holdings is too big of a price to pay for you to become a public servant and live off 174K a year or whatever that insane number they make is, then you don't want to be a public servant.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want it bad enough, and because if you did, you would gladly sign liquidate your stuff and go do your job. But they don't want to be a public servant bad enough to do that. They want to keep making money. I mean, I'm sure. Look, there's plenty of congressmen out there that their financial disclosures are just like a blank sheet of paper. I've seen them. They don't have anything. Those are the people that. Good for you. Quite honestly, good for you. I mean, I don't want anybody to be broke out there, but like, you're about to get paid a 6-digit salary every year for being in Congress. Like,
what they want is an easy ticket to be a lobbyist, and until they get there, they're gonna be implementing policies that are going to benefit them when they get there. That's what I see.